90 scored test questions, and you're going to have 10 unscored test questions. What those test questions, the unscored ones are, is for instance, they're preparing a new batch of questions, and so they're going to give 10 of those just as a practice. So later on, they get feedback to determine whether they're going to use those questions or not. Now, Title V, which is the Safe Mortgage Licensing Act, also known as the Secure and Fair Enforcement for Mortgage Licensing, is the act that initiated all of this back in 2008. Now, the SAFE Act encourages all the states to participate in the nationwide mortgage licensing system and registry. It also requires states to have in place a system for licensing and registering loan originators. Now, part one of that exam, again, is going to be covering the federal laws, everything related to federal laws. Okay, we're going to talk about all of these. As we mentioned, also part two of that exam is going to be talking about the general mortgage knowledge, all the different programs, the loan products, and the terms. Part three, which is 25% of the exam, again, the loan application, qualifications, specific programs, closing, so all that we're going to look at, and also the ethics, which comprises of fraud detection, reporting, and prevention. Now, before we get started, we have to also look at the history of what's gone on here in the United States. Back in 1929, we had the Great Depression of 1929. Back then, we had a lot of unemployment. So there was a lot of high unemployment, factory closing, homeless families, high prices, increase in crime, and suicides. Now, if we fast forward to 2010, we're going to be seeing the same thing in 2009, 2008, 2010. We're seeing a lot of this happening right now. So the Great Depression of 1929. So basically 2010, we're seeing the same thing. Now back then, there was an inappropriate monetary policy that caused the collapse of these financial markets. It took the government almost 3.5 years to respond. Back then, there was no deposit insurance, there was no regulation, there was no oversight going on. So to prevent this from happening again, like I said, it took them almost 3.5 years to respond to this situation. The government under President Roosevelt, signed what's called the signing of the Glass-Steagall Act of 1933. So the Glass-Steagall Act of 1933, in the wake of 1929 crash, prohibited commercial banks from underwriting securities. And what it did also, it separated investment banking from commercial banking in order to prevent a conflict of interest and protect the investors. So what it did, it separated insurance companies and investment banks and commercial banks. Now, in 1998, April 7 of 1998, there was a merger of two of the largest financial companies, a Travelers Group, which was an insurance company, and Citicorp. So they took the first name of Citicorp, the last name of Travelers Group, and they formed a new company called Citigroup, which became the biggest financial institution in the world in 1998. And what it did, again, it combined the three industries of insurance companies under Travelers, investment banks under Solomon Smith Barney, and also the commercial bank under Citibank. And this is what caused the birth of Citigroup. So here we have John Reed, which was the president of Citicorp at that time, Sandy Weill, which was the CEO of Travelers Group, and Robert Rubin, who was the U.S. Treasury and later came on board to Citigroup. So we have to understand what's happened in the past also, again, to understand what's happening in the future. So we saw the repeal of the Glass-Steagall Act, and the key players back then, again, was CEO of Travelers Group, Sandy Weill. Now, Sandy had a lot of influential friends, and one of those friends was Senator Phil Gramm, who was the chairman of the Senate Banking Committee. He also had another friend, the Federal Reserve President at that time, Alan Greenspan, and also the Securities Exchange Chairman, Arthur Levitt. He also had another friend who was, again, a part of the U.S. Treasury at that time, Robert Rubin, and also another friend, political ally, Bill Clinton. So again, with the combination of all these politicians, they were able to repeal the Glass-Steagall Act of 1933. So in 1999, they repealed this law. And as we saw that in less than 10 years after the repeal of this law, the financial markets here again in the United States came tumbling down. In less than 10 years, the financial markets again came tumbling down. Okay, so again, we have to understand who the players are. Later on, we're going to be looking at Phil Gramm. So back in 1999, former chairman of the Senate Banking Committee pushed through the historic banking deregulation bill that eliminated these Depression-era firewalls that were the protection of the U.S. economy. And again, what this did, it set off a wave of merger mania. So a lot of the other banks started doing the same thing as Citigroup, a copycat. Everybody started to merge. Okay, and back then also they created the Graham-Leach-Bliley Act, the GLBA, which is also known as the Financial Services Modernization Act of 1999. Okay, so here we have Phil Graham, Jim Leach, and also Thomas Bliley. So again, they formed this new act called the Graham-Leach-Bliley Act, also known as the Financial Services Modernization Act of 1999. And here we see the signing of the repeal of the Glass-Steagall Act with President Bill Clinton signing the repeal also back in 1999. So again, banking deregulation, again, it's you eliminated these Depression-era firewalls, again, that were protecting consumers back then. Now, fast forward from 1999 to 2007, here we have some headlines from 2007. A lender to reduce $16 billion in loans. This is talking about Countrywide. It's about to modify or refinance ARM's adjustable rate mortgage of 82,000 borrowers who are facing foreclosure. Merrill Lynch is going to lose $7.9 billion. Decline in home sales sets records back in 2007. And also Bank of America to lay off over 3,000 employees. So again, the information that was out there was, there was the looming out there. There was also an indicator of what was to come in the markets. Here we have another ad from 2007, December 2007, indicating what were they smoking. Talking about the best financial minds here from Citigroup, Bear Stearns, Morgan Stanley, and Merrill Lynch, all losing millions and millions of dollars. Okay, so the writing was on the wall, an indicator of what was to come, but yet these companies didn't do anything. Citigroup here again, Merrill Lynch, UBS, again, all the major financials losing millions and millions of dollars. And as we know, some of these companies are no longer with us. Okay, so again, the banks took on too much risk versus the reward they were getting. They were highly leveraged. It was easy to get access to credit back then, home equity loans, again, the subprime mortgage market. You had stated income, no assets, no verification. Again, lack of due diligence on the part of the lenders and weak underwriting criteria back then also. And so that you had banks that were imploding. Okay, so banks like Washington Mutual, whose shares plunged, and again, finally that bank went under. Okay, so again, the largest failure of U.S. bank ever with Washington Mutual. So again, the financials, the lending companies are in a crisis. And again, we see a lot of these companies, again, some of them are no longer here, like Lehman Brothers. They went bankrupt. Now, there was some that the bank protected, and there were some that, again, the government decided that they weren't going to bail them out, and those banks went bankrupt. Okay, so in 2008, there was a bill that they were going to vote on, that Congress was going to vote on. And once that bill got rejected, we can see here from the Dow Jones. Here we're seeing the Dow Jones is an indicator of the financial health of the United States. Okay, and here we see in the Dow Jones took a dive after the bill got rejected, after they rejected the TARP, the Troubled Asset Relief Program, of bailing them out for $700 billion. Okay, so again, if this was your heart, you would have been having a heart attack if this was an EKG machine. But this was the EKG machine of the United States economy. And after the bill was rejected, the Dow Jones dropped over 777 points. Again, this was the United States having a heart attack. And again, the failure of the government to react cost the U.S. economy over $1.4 trillion for their failure to react. Okay, so we saw the collapse of Wall Street. It was a financial Pearl Harbor due to government paralysis back then. Finally, on October 3rd, the U.S. government bails them out, gets the approval to bail out these banks, and creates the Emergency Economic Stability Act of 2008. So again, they went ahead and bailed them out with a $700 billion rescue package that was approved, otherwise known as TARP, as the Troubled Assets Relief Program, TARP. And again, what the United States government was trying to do, they were trying to prevent what's known as systemic risk. Systemic risk is, again, it's like a cancer that starts spreading to all the institutions. And they were trying to stabilize Fannie Mae and Freddie Mac, which are the pillars that hold it's a foundation that holds all the banks together. They were trying to stabilize the banks and also to unlock the credit freeze. So as we saw, the government now has intervened with the nationalization of most major players in the U.S. financial system. Okay, so again, Citigroup was one of those banks also. So again, back in 1998, we saw the merger, and then 10 years later, in 2008, this bank was about to collapse. But again, the government bailed them out, and they're still around. Okay, so again, Big Apple, New York City is known as the Big Apple. Wall Street is in the Big Apple. That's a Big Apple right there. Okay, but again, from what we've seen, Wall Street has become the big rotten apple. They've done a lot of things, lack of their due diligence, and doing things the right way. And that's the big rotten apple, as we see right here. Okay, but that's actually Wall Street right there, the big rotten apple. Okay, now what they did, again, they took these toxic mortgages, okay, these bad loans. What they did